In 1957, the Philadelphia Police Department did something that still haunts forensic investigators to this day. They took the body of a dead child, a boy no older than 4, and they dressed him. They combed what was left of his crudely cut hair. They sat him upright. And then they photographed him, eyes closed, posed like a sleeping child in a catalog, and printed that image on 400,000 flyers that they scattered across the entire eastern seaboard. 400,000 chances for someone to say. "400,000 flyers, and not a single person came forward. Not one. For 65 years, that boy had no name. No family, no history. He existed only as a case number and a grave marker that read, But what if I told you that someone always knew exactly who he was and chose to say nothing? The story begins on a cold February afternoon in 1957. The kind of cold that settles into the bones of a city like Philadelphia and doesn't leave until April. The Fox Chase neighborhood sits on the northeastern edge of the city, a quiet, almost rural stretch of modest homes bordered by dense patches of woodland. Susquehanna Road cuts through it like a scar, lined on both sides by bare winter trees and overgrown ditches where teenagers dump things they don't want found. On February 23rd, a young college student named Frederick Benones was walking along that road, checking his muskrat traps in the woods, a common enough hobby in that part of Pennsylvania in the 1950s. That's when he saw it. A large cardboard box, partially hidden in the underbrush, about 15 feet off the road. It was a JCPenney bassinet box, the kind you'd buy for a newborn. The flaps were partially open, and inside, something was wrapped in a blanket.
No.
Benones moved closer.
No.
He
I
saw
can't believe
skin. Small, pale, bluish. He knew what he was looking at. And then he walked away. He didn't call the police. He didn't tell anyone. He was checking illegal traps, and he didn't want the trouble. 2 days passed. 48 hours where that box sat in those woods in the February cold with a dead child inside it. It wasn't until February 25th that a passing motorist noticed the box and flagged down a highway patrol officer.
Officer, you need to see this. What is it, sir? Over there, in the woods.
And what they found inside would become the longest-running unsolved homicide in Philadelphia's history. The boy was naked. His small body was wrapped in a cheap flannel blanket, a plaid pattern of green, rust, brown, and white that had been cut in half and clumsily stitched back together with mismatched thread. The kind of mending you'd see in an institution, not a home. He was approximately 4 years old, with blue eyes and light brown hair that had been recently and badly cut. Clumps of hair still clung to his body, as if someone had given him a haircut and then never bothered to wash the trimmings away. Or perhaps they had. Perhaps that was the point. Because here's the detail that kept investigators awake for decades. Despite the severe malnutrition, despite the extensive bruising that covered his tiny frame, old bruises layered over new ones. A calendar of sustained abuse written on his skin. Someone had groomed this child before placing him in that box. His fingernails were trimmed. His body appeared to have been washed. Whoever killed this boy had taken the time to clean him up afterward. That is not the behavior of a stranger. That is the behavior of someone who knew him. Someone who, even in the act of disposing of a child's body, felt compelled to make him presentable. And that contradiction, the violence and the care existing in the same hands, would torment everyone who touched this case for the next 6.5 decades. The Philadelphia Police Department threw everything they had at the investigation. And I mean everything. Detective Remington Bristow from the medical examiner's office was assigned to the case early on. And what started as a professional duty became something closer to an obsession. The kind we've seen consume investigators before. If you've followed our coverage of the Isdell woman case, you know what happens when a nameless victim latches onto the mind of a good detective. It hollows them out. Bristow began carrying a plastered death mask of the boy in his briefcase. Every day, 2 meetings, to crime scenes, to dinner. He kept a copy of the boy's photograph in his wallet where most men kept pictures of their own children. The department distributed those 400,000 flyers. They canvassed every orphanage, every foster home, every hospital within a 200-mile radius. They ran the boy's fingerprints against every database that existed. They checked missing persons reports across 38 states. Nothing, no match, no lead, no name. It was as if this child had never existed at all. As if he had materialized inside that JCPenney box fully formed and already dead. Bristow wouldn't stop. He developed a theory, his own theory, that the boy was connected to a foster home, located roughly 1.5 miles from where the body was found. A property run by a man whose stepdaughter, Bristow believed, had given birth to an illegitimate child. In 1950s America, that was a scandal worth hiding. Worth burying. Perhaps literally. Bristow pursued this lead for 30 years. He visited the property. He consulted, and this tells you how desperate he was. A psychic who led him directly to that same
Mr.
foster
Henderson?
home.
I'm here about the placement.
But the evidence never materialized. The stepdaughter denied everything. And when DNA technology finally became available decades later, testing ruled her out completely. She was not the mother. Bristow's theory, the one he'd built his professional legacy around, the one he carried alongside that death mask, collapsed. He died in 1993, never knowing the boy's name. 30 years of his life consumed by a case that outlived him. And then there was the woman known only as... In 2002, she contacted police with a story that seemed, at first, like the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. She claimed her mother, an abusive, violent woman, had purchased the boy from his birth parents in 1954. She said the child had been kept in their home and systematically abused. She described the night he died, a fit of rage, a bathtub, the boy vomiting baked beans, a detail that matched the autopsy report, which found remnants of baked beans in his stomach. The specificity was chilling, but when detectives investigated, the story fractured. Neighbors swore they had never seen a young boy living in that house. The timeline had inconsistencies, and herself had a complicated history with the truth. The lead went cold, joining a file that was already thick with dead ends and false starts. And the boy in the box remained exactly that, a boy in a box. No name, no justice, no answers.
This confirms our
But the
suspicions.
case was
I agree.
never truly
Now, let's
abandoned.
connect the missing piece.
Yes. Look here.
In 1991, a remarkable organization called the Vidocq Society, named after the legendary French detective, adopted the case. The Vidocq Society is not a police department. It's a private group of forensic scientists, retired FBI agents, criminal profilers, and medical examiners who volunteer their expertise on cold cases. They are, in many ways, the last resort for the dead who have been forgotten by the system. And they refuse to let this child be forgotten. They pushed for new technology. They advocated for exhumation. And in 1998, they got their wish. The boys' remains were exhumed from Ivy Hill Cemetery for the first time. Forensic scientists extracted mitochondrial DNA from a tooth. A remarkable achievement for the technology available at the time. The DNA was entered into every national database. And again, nothing. No match. The boys' biological family, wherever they were, had never submitted their DNA to any system. They were ghosts. Or they were hiding. Here's where the story shifts from tragedy to something that feels almost like a resurrection. 21 years after that first exhumation, in 2019, investigators obtained a court order to dig up the boys' remains a second time. But this time, the technology was different. This time, they had forensic genetic genealogy. The same revolutionary technique that caught the Golden State Killer in 2018.
Oh my.
Instead of looking for a
Look
direct
at these new
DNA
branches.
match,
They just keep multiplying.
forensic genealogists can build family trees using partial DNA connections, third cousins, fourth cousins, distant relatives who uploaded their DNA to public genealogy databases like GetMatch, never imagining that their
I think I found
recreational
it.
ancestry search would help solve a 60-year-old murder.
You did.
The new samples from the 2019 exhumation were sent to a specialized lab. And this time, after 400,000 flyers, after 3 decades of Remington Bristow's obsession, after the Vidocq Society's tireless advocacy, after 2 exhumations and 6 to 5 years of silence, the DNA spoke. Investigators identified relatives on the boys' maternal side. They traced the connections backward through generations of birth records, marriage certificates, and census data. Branch by branch, the family tree narrowed. And at the end of that tree, they found her, his mother. Once they had the mother's identity, they obtained something that had eluded every detective, every forensic expert, and every amateur sleuth who had ever worked this case, a birth certificate. A piece of paper with a name on it. A real name. Not.
Thank you all for being here today at the Philadelphia Police Department.
A name that someone, somewhere, had once spoken aloud while looking into the
measures we
face
are
of a
implementing
living
today are
child.
essential for the safety of our community. We ask for your continued cooperation during this critical
On
time.
December
For over
8th,
4 decades, this
2022,
document has been hidden.
Captain Jason Smith of the Philadelphia Police
We bring it into the light.
Department stood before
The Philadelphia
a room full
Police
of
Department
reporters
has
and
made
cameras
significant
and said the
strides this
words
month,
that
demonstrating our
65
unwavering commitment
years
to
of
public safety.
investigators had fought to say. The boy's name was Joseph Augustus
Name on this birth
Zarelli.
certificate, after 65
Born
years,
January
is
13th,
Jane Doe.
1953.
Jane Doe?
4 years old
Yes.
at the time of his death. And just like that, after 65 years of silence, the longest-running unidentified child case in American history was over. the story doesn't end there. Because a name without justice is only half a victory. Investigators have confirmed that both of Joseph's parents are now deceased. His mother had several other children. Joseph had siblings who grew up, lived their lives, and may or may not have known that a brother existed and had been found dead in a cardboard box in 1957. Police have deliberately withheld the names of the parents and surviving siblings, citing both the privacy of the living and the integrity of an active criminal investigation. Because that's what this still is. An active homicide investigation. Someone beat a 4-year-old boy to death, wrapped him in a blanket, put him in a box, and left him in the woods. And as of this recording, no one has ever been charged. What happened on January 13th, 2023? May be the most quietly devastating moment in this entire story. That date, January 13th, would have been Joseph Augustus Zarelli's 70th birthday. 70 years old. A man who might have had children of his own, grandchildren, a career. A life measured in decades of ordinary, unremarkable days. Instead, he got 4 years of abuse and 6 to 5 years of anonymity. On that day, at Ivy Hill Cemetery in the Cedarbrook section of Philadelphia, a small ceremony was held. The old headstone, the one that read, was removed, and in its place, a new marker was unveiled. It bears his portrait. It bears his name. Joseph Augustus Zarelli, for the first time in 66 years. The people who came to lay flowers at that grave knew who they were mourning. And yet, and this is what I cannot stop thinking about, the deepest horror of this case was never the violence. It was the silence. 400,000 flyers, and no one recognized him. A boy born in a Philadelphia hospital in 1953 with a birth certificate, with parents whose names were on that certificate, with siblings who survived, and not a single person in 65 years said his name out loud to someone who could help. Think about that. Think about how many people must have known. The parents knew. The siblings, if they were old enough, may have known. Neighbors, relatives, anyone who visited that home in 1953 or 1954 and saw a small boy who later simply wasn't there anymore. This wasn't a child who fell through the cracks of a broken system. This was a child who was actively erased by the people who were supposed to protect him. His birth certificate existed. His name existed. But the conspiracy of silence around his death was so complete, so airtight, that it held for more than 6 decades. The question was never. Someone always knew. The question was. Joseph Augustus Zarelli was 4 years old. He liked baked beans. Someone, at some point, cared enough to trim his fingernails. And for 65 years, that was the closest thing he had to a eulogy. Now he has a name. Whether he'll ever have justice remains the only question left, and it's one that the living still have the power to answer.